William Morris, Chapter 10, The End, Part 2. If there's one thing you should know about these stories, it's that regardless of what was happening, or what I was doing during my time at William Morris, it's safe to assume that I was so brutally hungover, I was about to puke. The moment the nurses informed me I was suddenly in charge of a 4-day-old infant baby girl was no exception. Still, I had made a life out of pretending I was fine no matter how rough I was feeling, and I put on a decent show, taking the news in stride. The baby, after all, was asleep in her infant car seat, a large plastic enclosure that was part first-class sleeper berth, part football helmet. Her tiny chin rested peacefully on her shoulder, and I could imagine a future where I sat at my desk at William Morris with the sleeping bundle beside me as I answered phones and leapt up to feed her her bottle. I cooed at the baby and then turned back to the nurses. So, I asked, what do I do? And they both died laughing again. We're just messing with you, they said. We'll take care of the baby. I was so overcome with relief I practically loosed my bowels right into my pants in the middle of their space. Oh, thank God, I exhaled, and then joined at last in their laughter, finally in on their joke. It was a good one. But I wasn't off the hook. They told me I would need to get them baby formula and diapers. Stat. Okay, I thought I can handle that. They gave me the sizes and brands and formulations, but I didn't really listen because my brain was immediately subsumed by the next task at hand. They told me I would have to hire a baby nurse, someone who could start immediately and take care of the baby for as long as Carol Ann was in the hospital. How do I do that? I asked, but they just held up their hands in surrender. It was not their job to figure that out. I hustled down to the Rite Aid on Cannon. I had been too embarrassed to ask, but I didn't actually know what a baby nurse was. When I was a baby, I had a nurse, but isn't that just a nurse? How is that different from a baby nurse, I wondered. The Rite Aid was icy cold, and I shivered as my sweat-soaked shirt, now crusted with salt, clung to my body. I could smell last night's vodka seeping from my pores. I wandered the bright lanes, contemplating the excessive abundance of choice. So many brands and sizes and ecological profiles. It was overwhelming. And how many to buy? I couldn't decide, so I purchased a range of options, just in case, and did the same on the formula as well. Ready-made, powdered, organic. I got something for everyone, and then hustled back to the doctor's office, my plastic bag full of infant supplies slapping against my thigh. I felt victorious returning to the nurse's station, the triumphant hunter back in the village with his kill. I was a provider, a man. The nurses were underwhelmed. They took what they needed, a fraction of what I bought, and told me they would care for the baby for the day while I worked on finding the baby nurse. I could then bring the baby nurse to meet the baby at the doctor's house in Holmby Hills after the office had closed. Holmby Hills people. This was one high-end OBGYN. Go get that baby nurse, they said, and turned their focus back on their charge. I walked back to my office chewing over this new assignment. I had people I could call to do just about anything. I could get house tickets to every show on Broadway. There was a guy, Ross Burton anyone, who could make most legal troubles just go away. I could book a private plane to Cabo, they're not really anywhere else, for the same price as a coach fare. But a baby nurse? The people I knew didn't have babies. But by the time I got back to the office, I had formulated a plan. It was a simple plan. It was a means I had for harnessing one of the most powerful forces in Hollywood. I would compose an email, and I would send it to all. The truth is, I had done it once before. I had, like Prometheus, dared to defy the gods and toy with one of their most heavily guarded tools. Its power proved intoxicatingly profound. After I'd been at the job for about 9 months, a friend of a friend called to ask about a job opportunity with a very dubiously monikered Ellen Crass. I felt like a seasoned pro at that point and was pretty skeptical if there could be anyone credible in the business whose name I did not know. Still, I said I would poke around. Does anyone know anything about Ellen Crass? I typed into my email address box and then recklessly, self-destructively fired it out to all. A reply came back in a matter of seconds. It was from Jerry Katzman, the freaking president of the whole company. He wasn't the president of some department. He was the president of all the departments. I have known Ellen Crass for many years and vouch for her unconditionally. Wow. No scolding, no shaming, no screaming in all caps. It was just a straightforward adult response. I guess when you get to the top, you really are above the fray. And, note to self, send all is some powerful stuff. What a rush. In fact, I'm shocked considering my addictive impulses. I didn't use it more often. But if ever there was a time to harness the power of the gods a second time, it was now. Can anyone recommend a good baby nurse? I typed. Rick Hess's wife is in the hospital and they need someone to care for their newborn. It's possible I included Nashville, New York, and London in my emails as well. Who knew where the right baby nurse might come from? This was a stranger you were going to entrust with your most precious possession. They had to be the best. John Burnham's office came up with the goods. I believe the professional nurse his assistant recommended had just tended to John's very own recent newborn baby. And let's face it, a recent recommendation in circumstances like these was invaluable. Who cares who was a great baby nurse 17 years ago? They're probably old and alcoholic by now. We needed someone who was up to date on all the latest trends and technologies in current infant pedagogy. Burnham's baby nurse had not just taken care of his own most recently arrived infant child, she had been baby nurse to Jean-Claude Van Damme's most recent baby. She was baby nurse to the stars. Her name was Sherma Gaynor. Baby nurse to the stars may seem like a hacky punchline, but this is a real phenomenon in Los Angeles. If you're going to hire someone you've never hired before, we Angelinos find it very reassuring if they have been previously engaged by an A-list star. Need your HVAC redone? I like to use the guy that installed the AC for Will Smith. When our first child was born and it took hours and hours to get her to fall asleep without screaming at the top of her lungs, we dialed Reese Witherspoon's baby whisperer. We never actually hired her because her retainer was like $1,500, but we certainly believed her to be the best. I bought a Nissan Hybrid, much to my chagrin, on the insider knowledge that Sacha Baron Cohen had just bought one for himself. What is wrong with me? Sherma Gaynor, by some miracle, happened to be wrapping up a job that very same day. I would need to buy some diapers and formula. Ha, I was way ahead of her, and she could meet me on the corner of Curzon and Olympic at 4 p.m. Amazing. The only catch? Her rate was $750 per day. Yikes. Now, this may not sound like a crazy amount of money in 2025 terms, and I don't know how much that would be in actual dollars, but in mid-90s William Morris currency, that was 3 weeks' pay. I'm not going to say my boss was cheap, but he did lure me into a house-sitting gig to get a free dog walker / tomato picker. It felt like $750 might be a deal-breaker for him, but the best assistants I'd seen made the best decisions they could based on the best information on hand at the time. They owned their choices completely. Consequences be damned. Sherma Gaynor was hired. I found her, as promised, standing with her small wheelie bag waiting for me on the corner of Curzon and Olympic. She was a stout black woman in her mid-30s who was, I came to find out, a person of very few words. I got the vibe she kept her own counsel and didn't really suffer fools. This always makes me uncomfortable. I loaded her wheelie bag into my trunk and tried to reduce my chatter to its base minimum. I didn't really succeed. Before long, I was peppering her with questions of the baby trade and what it was like to work for JCVD himself. It turned out she had baby nursed all 3 of his children. That felt like a major endorsement. But I got the vibe that when Jean-Claude was not prancing around set throwing balletic MMA roundhouses, he was kind of a boring family guy. Well, that was a disappointment. And Sherma let me prattle on, the stealth assassin that she was, until I revealed I'd gotten her name from John Burnham. I suspect now, though I was oblivious at the time, Sherma kept her cards close to her vest, that she was playing dumb when she asked me if John Burnham represented Roseanne Barr. I lit up as I confirmed that, in fact, he did. She nodded quietly, taking it all in. She was biding her time. Besides, we had arrived at the doctor's house. Dr. Crane lived in a stately colonial with a wide columned front porch. It wasn't a huge house by the standards I'd grown up with out in the countryside, but for a home in the heart of Los Angeles, it was gargantuan. Sherma and I rang the bell and were quickly escorted back into the kitchen area where the baby sat snoozing on the center island. It was kind of amazing how far this baby had traveled in a single day, and yet remained remarkably unchanged. I, by comparison, felt like an entirely different human. Sherma showed me how to lock the baby carrier into my back seat, a task my stiffening back would come to know all too well 15 years later as I did it again and again with my own kids, and we pulled off. I was overcome by an abiding sense of calm as we drove through the night-clad streets with a lamplight glancing off my windshield. I had secured a veritable bastion of competence for the care of my boss's newborn baby girl, and she was riding peacefully in my back seat. Sherma Gaynor. Sure, she was expensive, but she was also the best. We got to my boss's darkened house, which felt surprisingly peaceful, considering how frantically it must have been vacated during that morning's emergency. I helped Sherma get situated and settled in, but I was tiring quickly as the adrenaline emptied my veins and the cortisol started rushing in. I had to get home, but I poked my head into the nursery to make sure everything was okay. Is there anything else I can do? I'm so thankful, so appreciative. I didn't know how to adequately express the depth of my gratitude and relief. You saved my life. I owe you. Just say the word. Whatever you need. She studied me for half a second and waited for me to meet her gaze. Maybe she wanted to gauge my sincerity, and I think she could see. I was for real. I would do anything for her. I want Roseanne's baby, she stated, quietly, emphatically. I must have flinched, maybe even shook my head like a cartoon boxer trying to shake off a blow, but she was undeterred. You represent Roseanne Barr, she clarified. I would like the job to be her baby nurse when the infant arrives. I love Hollywood. I love the ambition of the dreamers that come here and discover, like me, that it is not enough to just want it. At some point, you must find the words to stake your claim. I grinned and nodded my assent. Getting people gigs, after all, is what we did at William Morris. I'll make it happen, I said, and I bounded out the door, excited to return to the world I knew, with a task I knew how to accomplish.